It's your slightly under the weather studio host. On this episode of Be My Beard, look forward to Joshua talking about rural homosexuality and building a more inclusive Sacramento. Izzy talks representation and dates you didn't know you were on. Klaus talks about gym class fantasies. Enzo sips on throat comfort tea and tries not to expel snot while laughing. This and more on this episode of Be My Beard.
Welcome to the first episode of Be My Beard.
We are so happy to have you here with us today.
Today we will be interviewing Joshua about growing up queer in a rural area and working with the Sacramento LGBT Center.
Before we dive into the interview with him, we just wanted to take a moment to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about the vision of Be My Beard.
I'm Izzy, she, her. I'm an Aquarius sun and rising with a Leo moon. I have a dog, Juliet, and two cats, Harvey and Talia. You will probably hear me yelling at Talia at some point on the show because she is a devil child, but she is super cute, so we sold our souls to her. I love plants and being outdoors. My motto is if you can't hike it, kayak it. I have a meditation practice that I will be sharing with you all on Monday, so tune into that.
Hi, I'm Klaus. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Pisces sun, a Capricorn moon, and a Virgo rising, so I pretend to get shut down, but actually Izzy does it. My passion are plants and hiking. I will be doing segments on Friday called Fuck It All Friday. I'll just be talking about random things that I find interesting.
The way Be My Beard was born was very by accident.
You could say the condom broke.
Klaus and I were joking about starting a podcast after laughing at some Instagram posts, and Klaus took the reins and really got this whole thing to become a reality.
And as we were discussing the podcast, we decided that we wanted to talk about creating a safe space in order for people to share their journeys and becoming the best versions of themselves.
So we started inviting people to come talk about the struggles they had growing up and into themselves, teaching us things that they are passionate about, and telling us about who or what their beard was.
We are broadening the definition, the traditional definition of beard, to mean anyone or anything who has helped you become the best version of yourself.
And we would like to extend our services to all of you to be your beard as well.
A little housekeeping. We will be posting new episodes every Wednesday and mini episodes on Monday and Friday. We will have dark weeks every 3 weeks. This podcast is just Izzy and I with a few friends. We will need the time to make sure that we create quality content.
Well, I think we're ready to switch over to our interview with Joshua. All right, we are here with Joshua. He is going to be sharing a little bit about his story growing up, and then he's going to tell us about his current job working for the LGBT Center in Sacramento. Yes. So do you want to start by just telling us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. Just introductions,
Yeah,
basic.
your pronouns,
Oh, for sure. My name is Joshua Norman Hurtado. And I go by he series of pronouns, and it's just a really great pleasure to be here today.
We're so happy to have
Thanks for
you.
coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess where should I begin?
Let's begin with young Josh down on the farm.
I live out in the farm. We lived out in the forest, out in the mountains.
Oh, got it. So
I know.
Young Josh out on the
coal.
homestead.
Something like that. There's a lot of cows.
Little cabin in the big woods.
There we go. I hail from, birthplace was Amador County. It's about maybe an hour and a half from Sacramento. And growing up, rural county, our biggest city was maybe 4,000 people.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Well, even less than that. It's just sort of rounding up. But we moved a lot in between Amador County, and then there's a county up in the mountains called Calaveras, which was if you thought this was out in the boons, this is further out in the boons.
So you were living in places that were so small they weren't even incorporated towns. It was just we live in the county.
You go down one street, you blink and you'll miss it. So that kind of whole thing.
Like, well, we got ourselves a corner store.
No, I'm sure people went crazy when we got like a Carl's Jr. finally, or like a Starbucks and whatnot. So
Damn.
it's not so small that we like don't have a Starbucks.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's really interesting growing up just because I think from ever since I really hit puberty, I knew that my attractions were for the same sex. I just didn't really have a great way of explaining that either to myself or whatnot, just because the climate that I lived in was pretty far for accepting at the time. I was felt like I had this sort of dirty secret, and it's just really funny what you pick up on when you're a kid, because a really like is like back then when like saying that's gay was like, you know, pretty rather common and whatnot. So it's like I grew up knowing that gay meant something disgusting rather than just, you know, having a same-sex attraction. Like that was my first connection with it. So
I remember my mom ripping me a new one for saying that's gay. Like, my mom was furious when I started saying that.
And I didn't get that at the same time either. So it's like, I think I like spilt something in the kitchen one time, and this is like 8-year-old Joshua. And I was like, that's gay. And my mom was furious. She's like, what? Where did you learn that?
Was she, like, furious that, like, you were using the word gay, or that you were using it in, like, a derogatory way?
In a derogatory way.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So your parents were, like, relatively accepting?
Relatively. I think the strange thing is that with my mom, it was a bit more of a rocky road. It's really hard because it wasn't like I was, like, thrown out or shunned from that side of the family, but she just had a very sort of neutral outlook where it wasn't supporting either. It's just like, I need some time to think about this, and in my opinion just kind of took her sweet time thinking about it.
Yeah, there's not a lot to necessarily think about, I feel like.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it's just sort of like coming to grips with, it's like, you know, oh, this is my only son. I had this whole fantasy built up that, you know, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to, you know, be happy as a straight man because, you know,
well, you can still do all of those things.
Exactly. But this is like very much like early 2000, you know, thinking and whatnot. But
are you an only child?
I have a younger half sister on my mom's side, but also an older half sister on my dad's side.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mostly grew up with my younger sister. Yeah. My dad's side, however, completely different. I originally came out when I was 19. So that was when I actually first moved out to Sacramento and whatnot. I just felt a lot more comfortable coming to terms with this, and just the friends, the people that I hung out with really made all the difference. Where was I? Talking about my dad's side, completely accepting. So I came out to him after my mom. I was even more nervous about coming out to my dad, just because with my mom was like very sort of lukewarm. So I was like, okay, this might be hard.
You've already hit Klaus right in the feels.
Did I?
Yeah.
I was silently sobbing in the corner. This always happens.
This always happens. It just usually doesn't happen this early.
Just like, oh my gosh, we're just getting to the beginning, honey.
I was like, we're starting early.
Ooh, get
today.
ready for chapter 2.
It's not a Be My Beard episode if Klaus doesn't cry.
That's right.
But when I came out to my dad, it was on Christmas Day, but at that point I was dating somebody. I was like, well, I've been seeing this person for a while. It's appropriate that I'd want to spend the holidays with them. So I was like, thinking back in November, back in Thanksgiving, that's like, oh, I might come out to him this time. But then I decided, okay. So it was like a week from Christmas, I came out to my dad, and just coming out to my dad was so totally different. We had a talk, and it's kind of cute because he was like, well, I wish you would have like told me earlier, you know? Uh, but I feel like a lot of accepting and supportive parents kind of have this. Is like, well, kind of already knew, just like, wish you would have told us earlier, but we understand that you weren't like ready. So is really touching, and just the incredible support that I got from my dad, I think was enough of support from like parents and whatnot to sort of make me feel comfortable about myself and whatnot. I remember one conversation we had about, your parents are always curious about, or are you seeing anybody, yada, yada, yada. And when I was talking to my dad about it, it wasn't like a really awkward, like, oh, I'm talking to my straight dad about this guy that I'm dating. It was just it came off so incredibly genuine, which is really cool.
Just a son talking to his dad about his relationship.
Exactly. Which is like ideally how it should be, not that I'm like setting standards, but it's like, if we want to build healthy homes, it's just normalizing it is so incredibly empowering and powerful.
I've always said that if I want kids, which is never going to happen, but if I like ever accidentally ended up with a child, I would want them to feel like, I would want to create a space where they felt like they didn't have to come out to me. Like that would be my goal. Like, not that they would feel like, like obviously I'd want them to feel so accepted that like they could bring somebody home and it wouldn't like matter to, like, they would know that it wouldn't matter to me.
Right.
That's like, that would be my goal. And that's like, I guess my dream for the world is that like kids don't have to come out. They can just bring somebody home, and that people can just like take that on face value, like person by person basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if it's going to take like another generation or so, but I think once our generation start having kids, we'll start to see those differences where it's like, back then when you saw an interracial couple, like that's something that was like in your head. It's like, oh, they're like, interracial. But I think this time it's like, oh, they're gay. But I think that maybe the next generation, it'll just be so normalized that it's like, oh yeah, it's entirely in the back of my head. It's not even a forethought kind of deal. But yeah, moving off from there, I found that with my dad's side of the family, I was just very lucky because it turns out that there is basically all of my dad's siblings have at least one gay kid, excluding my uncle. So that's like 3 or 4 other gay cousins that I get to talk to and connect with and whatnot. So growing up, especially in my teen years, I just felt like I had such a incredible disconnect with my family. So going into my early 20s, it was really refreshing to be able to reconnect with family, and just like sort of, I learned that that was an important thing that was missing that I didn't know was missing. And it's so funny because I was looking back, and as far as like LGBT rights and accomplishments within the last decade, there's been so many incredible changes. Federal recognition of gay marriage is like a really big one.
Yeah, that was definitely a big moment in history.
Right. But I remember like in middle school, in high school too, I believe, there's incredible amount, like almost just a horrible amount of teenage suicides due to pressure of not being accepted at school, at home, and whatnot. So it's really awesome to see so much change in so little time. And I think like it's those little things that sort of propel me forward and give me some kind of hope for the future. You know, that the younger generations that still are coming into their own will have a lot smoother transition into life. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much in a nutshell. You know, being in a rural county, there really wasn't any LGBT representation growing up. Something that I'm really happy about is that there's the Tri-County LGBT Alliance is what they call it. So that's between Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne County, I believe. And, you know, basically it's just the LGBT folks between those counties getting together, socializing, networking. And it's just incredible to see that kind of representation in small communities where it's kind of there. I think that rural counties, rural areas, there's a really great need for that because it's harder to have those kinds of resources available when you're so far away from, say, a metropolitan area.
I think that also ties in a lot with like how important like representation in the media is as well. Because like when we were growing up, there wasn't really much representation, and like the representation was always very like stereotypical. Like, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't as all encompassing much more like as it is now, which
Right.
I think like I didn't grow up in a rural area, but and I also didn't grow up queer, but I can imagine like seeing it more regularly in like TV shows and movies and stuff, and as not as like the gay character, but like just as a person would help it so much for especially kids in rural areas who don't necessarily have as much access to like community centers and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Where was I going to bounce off of that? I totally forget, but yeah, that totally raises a really great point. Oh yeah. Gay media, like back then as to today, I feel like, the only like real gay centered movies or whatnot, when you think of, say, like, Brokeback Mountain or whatnot, were like the first ones that I, you know, have ever heard of, or the first exposures to.
And it
like,
just became like a joke. Like it became the butt of so many jokes because it wasn't like a gay movie.
Yeah, or like it set the standard that it's like, okay, so any gay romance is basically just going to be like a tragedy story, which, you know, I don't want to like say those movies weren't important, but it's just nice to see that there's such a broader, more encompassing area in media nowadays. Sort of on the other side of things, the movie Love, Simon that came out not too long ago.
I haven't heard of it, but yeah.
You've never heard of it?
I'm
Oh.
like the worst with pop culture though. I've like not heard of anything.
It's fabulous. It's this really cute sort of coming of age story.
I do not watch coming of age movies, so that's the
Do
other
you watch
reason.
gay coming of age movies?
No, I won't watch any coming of age movies.
It's so cute.
My
he like comes out of the
philosophy
closet
is,
and
like,
everything.
I went through puberty already, and I'm not gonna watch somebody else go through puberty. Like
That's
like,
fair enough.
Like once was enough.
That's fair enough. I never got like shows like Degrassi.
I never
You know?
watched that either.
So it's not your cup of tea.
The other only show I like really think of like growing up was like watching Will and Grace.
Mm-hmm.
And like there was definitely some more like normalized like gay characters in that. It had like both, like the very flamboyant and then the very like not, like the quote unquote like straight passing character.
Yeah. Who's the character? Sean.
I don't remember. It was like my best friend's favorite show, and I only ever like watched it a few times with her. There was like the
We're getting
very
off topic.
flamboyantly gay guy, and then there was like the main character gay guy who was not flamboyant.
Right. I mean, I love Will and Grace. It's just, I thought that show itself had a very wide spectrum of, you know.
But yeah, it's like we can think of one. Like, So you come to Sacramento. Are you going to school? Like, what are you doing out in Sac?
Currently, I am not attending school, but really hoping to get back into that. It's been a real trip being on 2 jobs for the last 2 years. So right now I'm taking some time to focus on one job and myself, like self-care and whatnot.
That's
So
good.
Yes.
yeah. And it's so funny because I sort of had to relearn what self-care was for like the last month. So it's good to be back. Basically. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, right now I am currently working at the Sacramento LGBT Center. I work in their new program that they started up about a little more than 6 months now. It's been about half a year. Their STEP program. And what that basically does, it provides temporary housing for queer young adults ages 18 to 24 in the Sacramento region.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about like what your job is, like the overview, and then like maybe like what you go through, like what a night on the job looks like maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I work overnight, which is a really interesting shift. There's a lot of quiet hours while everybody's asleep, but basically my job is to ensure that there is a safe space environment where everybody has the opportunity to focus on getting their stuff together, whether it's, finding employment, finding housing, and whatnot. And just overall ensure the safety. I work a lot one-on-one with residents. I'm not very involved with like the actual scoping out housing for them. It's a lot more of like a lot more of a personal relationship with the residents and whatnot. So
Almost like a counselor or like a mentor,
like an unofficial counselor.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like a really good, yeah. Loads of times, I have late night hours where, they either can't sleep or there's something on their mind. So sometimes it just really helps being a ear just to listen to them and whatnot. So that's a big chunk.
Do you have any training in this, or is it just something that you have like an affinity for, or like?
I kind of a mixture of both. I mean, I do come from a background of I've worked in a residential treatment for people with chemical dependency for a time. I did that for about a year, and then I moved on to working with children with autism. So I guess that whole path has been very centered around like behavioral sciences, sort of psychology area, which is one of my greatest passions. So I mean, if I could do anything that goes into that, is awesome. But the fact that I could do something that sort of connects me greater to my peers in the community that I'm a part of, even better.
Do you have an undergrad in psychology or?
Not currently.
Oh, so that's
Just
cool.
a lot of work experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, that's cool to hear that like there are opportunities for people who have a passion for these types of things, but not necessarily the ability to go to college.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I suppose that's the next step, getting my degree and whatnot, because I could really see myself doing something in either like youth advocacy or whatnot.
This is a question about school, I guess. So, with school, do you like that you didn't like finish it and that you got to like experience some work in the field to like get to know what you wanted to do? Do you feel like that has helped like guide you further along your path or your journey into what you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it definitely was a great help to be able to get experience in fields I might be interested in or not interested in. I was going to school for a little bit, trying to experiment with, I might specialize in chemical dependency and social work and whatnot. But working for the residents of the drug treatment facility, it wasn't exactly the right fit. I just didn't feel a spark for it that I feel like a lot of other people do.
Do you feel that
As
with the youth that you work with?
Yeah, as opposed to like what I feel right now. I feel like it's definitely a much greater match with what I do. Yeah, definitely taking a moment to really focus on getting experience and whatnot, because the like current college situation, I think, especially in our age, is just such a cluster.
Take on this mountain of debt and good luck getting out of it.
Yeah.
right, with
And
no
good luck.
guarantee of having a well-paying job that will get you out of it. Just the prices are so astronomical than even our parents were used to.
Yeah.
So, and there's no sign of it ever lowering. So yeah, got to make it count. So that's definitely really helped me a lot.
So the other day you and I were at lunch and you were talking about this scale. Do you feel comfortable sharing more about the scale we were talking about?
Oh, sure.
The
Yeah.
gay scale?
Well, it's kind of
I'm making you an expert right now.
at this point it's pretty outdated, but it's still a really great simple way of sort of understanding where you are on like a spectrum of sexuality. It's called the Kinsey scale. I think it was Alfred Kinsey. He was a sexologist and psychologist who specialized in all kinds of different sexuality, whether it was sexual disorders, whether it was alternative sex in general. He really brought a lot of light and a lot of intrigue into basically an area of human study that not a lot of people, if anybody, even wanted to touch, just because, sex, ew. But yeah, the Kinsey scale basically grades your sexual feelings from 1 to 6, where it's like you are either exclusively heterosexual, which would be like a 0, to a 6, which is where your sexuality is exclusively homosexual. And of course, there's so much that we know today where it's like, okay, well, there's, heterosexual and homosexual, but what about all these other things that we now understand, like pansexual, asexual, whatnot? But let's see, 0 to 6, exclusively heterosexual, exclusively homosexual. And it just sort of, I think, laid down the groundwork to like, hey, you can live on this spectrum of sexuality and whatnot. You're not necessarily confined to being homosexual or being heterosexual and whatnot. So, yeah. And supposedly it's incredibly rare that you ever have someone who is exclusive in either direction. We use these labels to like sort of simplify not only our understanding, but to, have some kind of identity and representation that we put out in the world. So it's like, I could call myself, a proud gay man, but, supposedly maybe 1 in a million, 1 in every 100,000, maybe I find a woman attractive and whatnot. It's just very, I suppose, situational. And it's just like, I really like the idea that there's a lot more fluidity with sexuality.
Yeah, it is. I feel like sexuality and gender is so much more fluid than we really like think it is. I think we're all like on a spectrum in our own like unique ways.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a spectrum that stays in one place during our entire life,
Totally.
Kind of a point to add with the spectrum and whatnot. Sort of a funny story growing up in high school, because I didn't know like how gay I was. I just kind of inside myself, while I was closeted, I represented it as just like, okay, I'm like queer in some way. I definitely got that down, but like, what am I? At
Like,
one
that
point,
boy's cute.
right, that boy's cute, but then there's also an internal monologue where it's like, but don't think those thoughts. Don't do that. So that's kind of like, yeah, very like internal conflict growing up, which just really sucks that someone in their formative years has to go through in general, looking back on it. But growing up, there was this really beautiful girl, and she really had the hots for me. I only realized this later. We ended up going out, and she was like one of my best friends growing up. We went to a movie, we had dinner, it was the best time. And then after a while, it's like, oh, okay, like she's being really nice. We're like really good friends. And then at one point, that just like totally broke her heart at one point. So I kind of accidentally went on this date with this girl while being totally oblivious.
Okay, I just have to share that. No. So my husband, who is straight, because, you know, he's married to me as well. So, you know. But he totally did the exact same thing. But not because he, like, wasn't sexually attracted to, like, women, just because he's, like, completely oblivious of, like, when women are trying to hit on him. Like, he, like, went on a date. Like, they went and got dinner. They went to a movie. They got ice cream afterwards. And he didn't realize it was a date until he was dropping her off and she, like, went for it and went to kiss him. And then he was like, oh.
Right. Yeah.
So... yeah.
In this case, I gay.
You're like,
I am
oh.
massive homosaxophone. So such a
Oh,
homosaxophone.
brat.
Laid down on the scale.
Like Anglo homosaxophone.
So this poor girl, she...
So yeah, eventually we're really cool. She realized, oh, it's not because you didn't like me or anything, is because you were gay at the time.
because you don't like girls.
Right. There's like a full like 1 or 2 months where it's just like we didn't talk to each other afterwards. And yeah, I felt really bad about it. But we're on really great terms, like still one of my best friends growing up and whatnot. So yeah. Anyway, that's like my funny story growing up gay.
I feel like many gay men have a story of like when they accidentally broke this girl's heart.
Right.
Don't look at me. Shit.
Oh.
Do you want to hear my
Klaus.
story?
Yes, Klaus the heartbreaker.
I am actually. So basically, I was dating my friend at the time, and she was my best friend, like my everything, like, and that's why we worked out well when we were dating. But one day, I was like, okay, I'm gay, and I finally told
Those
her,
asses are way
like,
too hot.
I wasn't looking at asses, not in gym class, honey. Those gym shorts showed everything. I'll let your imagination run wild. Just imagine like jumping jacks before you go on your run. Anyway, it's getting hot in here. Anyways, so basically I had like told her that I liked this boy and that we couldn't date anymore, and I'm playing it down. I'm like totally making light of this situation. It was probably fucking awful to go through at the time. But the next day, because she was my best friend, I was talking about this boy and like things I did with the boy. And me being me and oblivious, I didn't realize like, oh my God, she does not want to fucking hear this.
Right.
And we didn't talk for like 3 years after that.
Right. Yeah.
But we're close friends again now. It's just like, shit.
Yeah. It's so funny when you look back at these horribly awkward moments and you just kind of laugh it off in a respectable way.
Yeah.
Because like her and I, like, we had a really great laugh about it, and we've never been closer. So yeah, but
How about I would like this point of view, if we can talk about it. What would like the steps be in order to, because I want people to know about like this resource that's available to them in case they don't already know.
Yeah.
What would the steps be to actually like get into the housing with the LGBT center? Like, how would you go about that?
Absolutely. I mean, walk-ins always appreciated into the SAC LGBT center, not just because there are the opportunities to like enroll you in housing, but either health procedures, STI testing. Currently, we just do HIV, but we are expanding that to a lot more STIs. So, you know, coming very soon, it's going to be really awesome to be able to do like a full panel, basically. Mm-hmm. And then just other resources, because the nonprofit resources are just a really interconnected network between the SAC, the LGBT SAC Center, between the Gender Health Center, between I forget what it stands for, but SNAC, like the Native American Health Center, basically. Just a real interconnected web of all these different nonprofit resources. So, you come in, usually there is some kind of respite available on a daily basis. And you could probably ask anybody, especially the front desk, like, hey, I'm someone currently experiencing homelessness. Who can I go see? Who can I go talk to? And then we have case managers available. We have a lot of really nice, friendly, and just welcoming people at the center that will definitely hook you up and say, hey, these are the first steps. We have this wait list available, and so on and so forth. And, definitely keep on checking in, because, a really important thing that we try to constantly instill is the importance of self-advocacy. We advocate for the people who either have a hard time or have very limited or no skills advocating for themselves, but we try to instill that sort of self-esteem, that self-worth that you need to inspire self-advocacy and whatnot. So keep on checking in. Absolutely.
So most of the people that are coming into the center, are they being like kicked out of houses, like their parents aren't supporting them anymore, or is it just like they've been on the streets, like, and now they're looking for a resource? Like, is there sometimes like a dependency issue involved? Like, what do you feel like is like the most common thing that brings people to the center?
Yeah. Well, we're all used to the word homelessness or experiencing homelessness, but I think a more accurate way, and something that I like using, is housing insecurity, just because that, you could be couch surfing, you can be hopping from maybe multiple members of your family's homes and whatnot. That is still a form of housing insecurity. So the main goal of our program and whatnot is to find you stable housing to where you at least have one thing off of your plate, and you have this room to focus on work or school or whatnot, and get your life on track to propel yourself forward.
What causes the housing insecurity, I guess, for most of the people that come in? Like dependency, their families kicking them out,
Multiple reasons.
they're
Absolutely.
coming to a metropolitan area because the resources are better. Like,
Yeah. A lot of them is families not being accepting, and that could be either kicking them out or just creating such a hostile environment to where it's like, I cannot live here for my own sanity. It is. I realize that this is like a bed, but it is better for me to like not be here and either couch surf or live in a tent than live in this toxic house right now. So you get a lot of that. Absolutely. Sometimes it is people who are coming off of the streets who have not had a home for quite a while. Sometimes it's people aging out of the foster care system, which is a really big issue, because when you're hopping from house to house, it's really hard to get all of the necessary skills that you need growing up and whatnot.
the foster care system is a whole other messy can of worms.
That's a whole other messy can of worms. And it's like, we talk about, okay, how can we solve housing insecurity, or, homelessness, or the price of this. And it's just such a interconnected problem. There's so many things surrounding that. It can be overwhelming at times.
I'm going to be like that person, kind of play devil's advocate. But do you feel like there are people that come into the center and just claim that they're LGBT to get resources? Or do you feel like it's usually just people who are LGBT and need resources? Or like, do you guys have a way of like, because you guys only offer your services to people who are LGBT or questioning, right?
That's correct. Yeah, our focus is, and the referrals that we get from even other agencies is that we are looking for housing for one of our most marginalized populations, which is LGBT youth. So yeah, and also, questioning and whatnot as well. That being said, we are a low barrier facility is what they call it. So we pull in people who may be going through addictions. We pull people who may be going through various mental trauma or mental disorders that they've, had from birth, which is, I think, a really big issue why you do see a lot of homeless in the world today, is that there are mental health resources that are either being mismanaged or just simply do not exist.
Yeah.
So these people don't have the facilities to take care of themselves. So they just fall into that kind of decline.
And do you turn people away who aren't LGBT, or like
Or
send
would
them
you refer them to like a different shelter so that way they can take advantage of that opportunity elsewhere? How would you go about that?
or does that seem to even be much of a problem?
It doesn't appear to be much of a problem, but like I said, we're so interconnected with a lot of other nonprofits and charities and whatnot that there is like referral resources to, what would be a housing placement more appropriate for you, I would say. But as far as like our respite care, especially over at the main center, our new location is on, get back to me on the address.
I'm looking it up right now.
Excellent. Because we moved around a couple times, so I want to make sure I get the numbers and everything right.
All right, it is 1015 20th Street.
There we go. Yes. That is our new building. It's absolutely wonderful. So much more space, so much more ability to do what we need to do in the county. But yeah, our respite care is all inclusive. If you need a break, cup of coffee, come on in, and you'll at least have some kind of break from the world out there.
Can you define respite care more in depth for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically a big chunk of time, which is like a few hours of being able to welcome people who are experiencing homelessness to get a cup of coffee. I think sometimes we supply snacks or food as well, oftentimes through donations. And it's just a place to chill out for a moment and either recollect yourself. We have a lot of computers, so those are free use as well, whether you need to send out job interviews or job resumes and whatnot. We have computers as a resource. And yeah,
Place
it's just
to charge your phone.
place to charge your phone. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. That's awesome.
What would you say is like your most favorite part about your job?
Favorite part of the job. I really like the people that I get to meet, whether it's a challenging resident who's really having a hard time or whatnot. It just feels really nice being able to be there for when it really counts and whatnot. Just being able to talk to them, hear their story and whatnot, and just to, I guess, have a better idea of the goings on in our Sacramento community. I think that's what I like most about it.
Just for the flip side of that question,
Yeah.
what do you dislike? What is your least favorite part of the job?
You're really playing well at this devil advocate thing.
That's our expertise.
Yes, hello, I am an Aquarius.
Hello, I'm the devil.
Nice to meet you.
We have your reservation at table A. Least favorite part about it, the late hours perhaps get to me. But that's, purely a graveyard thing. So
Yeah, I've never met anyone who works a graveyard shift and is like, I love it. It doesn't fuck up my life at all.
It's a trade-off. I do like having sort of the day open, but that means that I have the night reserved.
Yeah. You also
So,
like sleeping, I'm sure, is very difficult.
it can be. I have some like pretty great blackout curtains that just block out the sunlight, so I get to be like, a happy little vampire inside inside my little homestead. Aside from that, maybe, least favorite part. Sometimes it's hard, and this is just sort of general whenever you're in a human services position in general, is that sometimes when you feel like you've done everything that you can, but it's not enough. And, you know, having to keep on reminding yourself and doing the self-care that I've done everything that I can with respectful boundaries, and being able to accept the moments where it's like, this is going to be like a little bit of damage control, you know, until we can find suitable housing or whatnot. I think that's the hardest part.
Do you find yourself like suffering at all from like compassion fatigue, or do you try to like take care of yourself, do that self-care you were talking about? Does that like help, or have you like not been in the job long enough to really feel that fatigue yet?
I think it comes and goes, but just sort of really focusing on myself out of work, making sure that I am doing things that I enjoy and that sort of fill my bucket really helps when the hard times come.
Okay,
and
good.
whatnot. So it's a balance. Like, some days are easier than others, sure. And, you know, some days my bucket or my cups are more emptier than I like, but just gotta push through it, really.
You can totally tell me that this is like inappropriate and like a violation of like privacy, but can you share any like positive client interactions or negative interactions, or like give us examples, or like a situation that you're like particularly proud of the outcome, or like one that still kind of like lingers with you? If that goes against privacy
Confidentiality.
issues, yeah, we cannot answer it.
Yeah. For the respective confidentiality issues, if I could pronounce it, probably not anything too specific, but let me think for a moment if there's anything like sort of in a general way that is either been particularly challenging or particularly rewarding. Let's do bad news first, then good news.
Sounds
Yes.
great.
Yes. So, difficulties. I'd say like the perhaps one of the biggest hurdles is you have multiple people coming from multiple traumatic backgrounds and whatnot, and you put them all under one roof. The amenities are pretty well spacious, to be honest, but at the same time, you have like 12 people from perhaps similar walks of life, but oftentimes also incredibly different at the same time. So it's a lot of managing a lot of different strong personalities. Sometimes there's like, you know, pretty belligerent arguments that break out and whatnot, and just sort of being the mediator and like respectfully but firmly saying, hey, y'all gotta knock it off, all right? That would be a good example of like the more difficult times and whatnot. Something that's really rewarding and whatnot, it's really awesome to hear when I feel like my job and like the program is working. Like people, it just like it snaps together, and it's like, wow, I have a stable job right now. I could like actually legitimately save up money and sort of get out of this ditch that I'm in, and whatnot. It's like, oh, I finally have my house and everything. So those are the kind of like rewarding experiences that I live for. And Sacramento, it's a small city as cities go. Oftentimes I run into a lot of people that I notice from who used to be in the program and whatnot, and just seeing them in a much better place than they've been in. Just even if I'm just casually seeing them at the street on the street, or just working at their job and whatnot, it's just really rewarding to see that it's like they're building a functional life.
And you helped in building that foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to get your ego into it, but that, you know, you were definitely involved in it.
Right, exactly.
How long do people usually stay at the housing that you guys offer? Like, I know it's temporary, but how temporary is temporary?
So our program is typically a 30-day program, but it can be also extended to 90 days. And I mean, there's like a lot of situations, sometimes out of our control, that might lead to like a 90-day extension. Maybe there's just like not a lot of openings in more permanent housing situations and whatnot. But there's a lot of different housing programs that come after that. There's a really neat program called Host Homes, where it's we basically feed residents into host homes, and it's basically they're sponsored by a family that they get to like live with and continue like their path to employment and whatnot for a set amount of time. I think it might be 2 years, but I might have that number wrong.
So it's like adult foster care?
It's sort of in a way.
Or like a sponsor?
It's more of like a sponsorship.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they're not like the family that decides to host them isn't directly responsible for them, like say a foster parent would, but it's sponsoring, saying, hey, I have a room that you could basically be at. It's basically be like a housemate in my house.
Does the like person pay rent, or like is it a free program, or do the like sponsors get like support from the LGBT center? Like, how does that work?
There is I don't know the amount exactly, but there is a what do you call it, a subsidy stipend, yeah, for hosting one of the residents. Yes.
Okay, so the resident can go there and isn't having to pay rent.
Yeah,
So they're able to like build more of their own like savings and like figuring their own stuff out still.
Exactly. And then there's like
cool.
a group housing, TLP is what I believe it's called, and it's sort of along the same line. It's 2 years rent free, enough for you to like save up and get your life together. Even if you're working a part-time job, you could save a decent chunk of change.
I was just thinking about like what 2 years rent free would mean for me. Like it could be life changing.
Exactly.
And I'm in a very stable space in my life, so
right. That's like a used car. You could maybe attend community college and build
associates at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly.
We have a question from the audience.
Oh.
Enzo has delivered us a question.
Ooh.
It's in a sealed envelope. What societal change would make it easier for people to gain housing stability?
That's like a big question with like a lot of interconnected answers.
The presidential debate question.
Yeah, seriously.
I think that in a general sense, nobody wants to go through the stress and anxiety of becoming homeless and just that whole experience. It's oftentimes because of a deficit of some opportunity or skill that was denied them and whatnot. There's so many different things that we could do to make housing more affordable. I maybe one of the easiest ones is like, rent control, making sure that people who live locally can actually afford the spaces, and, people that are moving into the county don't jack up the prices too much. There is mental health services that I think would really help. But overall, I think an understanding that having people out there is actually creating a more deficit socially, culturally, and economically. Having people out on the street is just such a more deficit than it is investing in all of these either shelters or low rent or medical and mental facilities and programs and whatnot.
It's like we're now trying as a society to like slap a band-aid on these problems that isn't actually like solving the problems. Like anti-homelessness laws of like, oh no, like loitering and things like that, which are like just
Right.
like, it's just essentially like shuttling these people off to jail for 30 days and then just throwing them back out on the streets. And we're like, not really. And it is like a hugely complex like situation that has so many
Yeah.
different complex problems. But I think your point about that, you know, that having people still on this, like having people on the streets and more people on the streets is like creating more of, like, it's making it harder. Because now we're looking at like, how do we get these people off the streets instead of how are we keeping people from getting on the streets?
Exactly. And you know, once you hit low at a certain point, it gets harder and harder to climb yourself out of that hole. So helping people, first of all, not have to be in that situation in the first place, but also if you're in that situation, we have all these different resources that we can further fund, or we should be able to help you and whatnot. Just because, you know, socially, culturally, economically, it's just more expensive to have these people out on the streets rather than living their best lives. It's kind of like, I think that general society, I think this is not just like a county problem, just like a national problem, is that we want to take our problem and just push it somewhere else.
For the next nonprofit to fix.
Or the next town, you know?
In Southern California, there was, where I lived, there was a town called Laverne.
Yeah.
And apparently for a very long time, their police force was like picking up transient people and driving them to Pomona and just dropping them there.
Yeah.
Because like Laverne was like more affluent and they wanted to like keep that image. And so they would just go drop them in like the poorer town. And that was like how they were quote unquote like fixing homelessness in their town.
Right.
Is they're like, we have no homeless here. And like, but it was because they were just like putting these poor people like in this car, like, oh, by the way, now we're going to drop you miles from where you've been like living, for lack of a better word, like where you've created resources for yourself. And it was just like, and they got in a shit ton of trouble for it.
Well, locally, that's actually happened with El Dorado County and Folsom.
Really?
I finally think they got busted over like perhaps a decade of doing this, you know, just atrocious strategy.
It's horrific.
San Francisco sued, I think it was Las Vegas or the state of Nevada, for giving people one-way tickets to San Francisco
It's,
to like funnel homeless people there.
yeah.
That's such a, like, instead of, like, also, like, that's a significant amount of money. Like, imagine putting that kind of money and time and resources into, like, actually helping the people in your area.
Right.
Instead of being like, no, I'm going to give you, like, $100 bus ticket. Like, imagine, like, spending $100 per person into, like, resources. Like, oh,
Right.
that makes my blood boil. I'm so mad. That's such
Right.
bullshit.
No,
Lincoln,
absolutely. I hear you. From what I hear, even my hometown, all the way out in rural Amador County, there is a growing homeless population as well. And part of the reason is because places like El Dorado County give them a dollar bus ticket to just, you know, go somewhere else kind of thing. Yeah. No, it's a terrible problem. Absolutely.
Well, is there anything else you want to share? Anything else you feel like we didn't cover?
Wait, I had a question.
Yeah.
Specific to like volunteering at the LGBT center. If I
Yeah.
wanted to do that, what would be the proper steps to take?
Proper steps. Definitely send a email directly. I'm not sure who exactly coordinates with volunteers, but there is definitely a person that's on that. And if you either call the Sacramento Center or send an email, they'll be able to basically relay you to the person in charge of like getting volunteers and whatnot, which, you know, coming up, we're looking at Pride in just a few months. So volunteers are absolutely appreciated and well needed as well. So, yeah.
Okay, so here on Be My Beard, we have brought in the definition of beard to, who is someone or something that helped you become comfortable with yourself.
Ooh, interesting.
Who's your beard?
Or what?
Could it be an actual beard? Because
Like your literal
I'm
facial
sporting
hair?
that.
You
Yeah,
actually have a
this
beard,
really
but
helped me.
okay.
I'm yes.
Are you being serious?
No, absolutely not.
I was about to be like, this is the best moment of our life.
My beard, really helped me come into my own.
I was so excited for that. But anyway,
all about that glitter beard. I've never done a glitter beard before.
Sounds like Pride
I was about to
2020.
say
is when
Pride
it's
Pride 2020
happening.
vibes. Oh.
I have never been to a pride before.
My store
Never,
blacked
ever?
out Pride weekend at our for Sacramento Pride. I can't request it off.
What?
That is homophobic
That's
as all
what I
hell.
said. No,
That is a
it's
holiday to
because
us.
they moved the location to like right in front of the Capitol, so right in front of our store.
Oh my god, we were busy.
Yeah,
We were so busy
I was
for
like,
Pride.
I'm requesting one day off, and that is the day in the parade, because I only get to walk in a parade with my ass cheeks out and a little crop top and my high heels once a damn year.
I've never gone to Pride because I've always felt like as a straight person, like I would rather like be working so one of my coworkers could go who is gay or is
but
an
you
LGBT.
have plenty of like LGBT friends, so you could go to Pride and.
I'm not
support
saying
them,
like I
yeah.
wouldn't go. I'm saying like every year that it's happened, I was like in a place where I would go. I've always been like working and like most of my coworkers were there. So it's like, it's like I'm like totally willing to be the person who's like stays at work.
That's really awesome and thoughtful for you, because you do run into homophobic things like having to work on Pride weekend.
Yes.
Shit.
I'll be out there giving out all the free waters.
But no, I mean, right?
I'm just
But
gonna
no,
put out a
allies
$5
are,
candle.
more than appreciated at Pride and whatnot. So yeah, absolutely.
We gave out last Pride in one day. We gave out 400 waters.
Y'all just need to have like a water tower.
But anyway, back to who was
your
your
beard?
beard? Or
Oh,
what?
right. Yeah.
The most important part of the podcast.
Who's my beard? So beard is more than just like, your female best friend that, helped you like
If
come
that
up.
was your beard, we'd love to hear about her. Like, but it doesn't have to like be that like traditional definition.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I probably have to say that my beard is my best friend. I've known him for almost 6 years. My best friend, Sammy, he was the first person I ever came out to when I was 19. So that was like a really emotional part for me. And he's just the one person that I could perhaps confine just anything in my life to. So he's just been an incredible support since I, have moved out here and everything.
Aw,
He's
shout out
like-
Sammy.
Yeah, shout out Sammy. He's very much like the family that you get to choose. He's like a brother to me. So, yes.
That's wonderful.
Just to sort of go back to my childhood and whatnot, I did want to add that currently I've been having a much more open and personal relationship with my mom. So just sort of like if anybody out there is questioning if there's a possibility of rebuilding those kinds of bridges and whatnot, just hoping y'all know that there is that kind of hope of rebuilding bridges with family and whatnot. There is that possibility. But also the importance of being able to see the importance of the family you choose. And that's always been a cornerstone of your chosen family in the gay community. So y'all be safe out there now.
Anyone else you want to thank?
The LGBT Center for giving you the opportunity to help so many people.
Well, of course, that's really been just an incredible opportunity, Got to give it out to my work fam over there. But it just, I guess all the incredible people that I've met along the way, it's kind of strange because it's sort of like the universe is just working in some kind of perfect way in the end, that it's like I've met and I've connected with the people that have just given me such incredible life through work, through school, through everything. And I couldn't be more grateful. That means you guys.
Well, we're happy to like be able to provide this space and talk about things like this, because it's not every day that you get to discuss work or like being gay in a rural community. It's not every day. I mean, it's once a week for us.
We're here to be your fairly pod parents.
I love that.
Is that a new hashtag?
New podcast.
I'm embracing it. The parent pose, like, really. Would you like to be our next guest? Email us at bemybeardpodcast@gmail.com.
Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and let us know what you'd like to hear.
Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/bemybeardpodcast.
Theme by the marvelous Wayne Jetski. We are forever grateful to Enzo Arona for being our studio director.
All rights reserved.
We would like to thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey.
Follow your heart.
And be the best you can be.